Greenwich Village is the kind of place where time seems to slow down. The narrow streets, the cobblestone alleys, the way the cafe windows fog up with warmth against the crisp air. All of it makes the city feel like it's waiting for something. For Alina, it's where the past lives. And maybe tonight it will catch up with her. Alina Price sat alone at a corner table in the village cafe, sipping her coffee and staring at the busy street outside. The same old bustling city, but everything felt different today. She couldn't shake the feeling that something important was going to happen, something that might force her to confront a part of her life she had long buried. The door opened, and a familiar chime sounded. Alina didn't need to look up to know who it was. Noah Pierce. Even after all these years, she could recognize his presence, the way he walked, the way his suit seemed perfectly tailored to fit his tall frame. He had always been that way, polished, poised, and far too ambitious. When he stepped into her line of sight, Elena's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't seen him in a decade, and yet here he was, standing in front of her like he had never left. The years had changed him, but in some ways, he was still the same man she once loved. The same man who had walked away from her for a dream that didn't involve her. Noah didn't speak at first. He just stood there, eyes scanning the room, as if trying to get a read on her. Alina didn't say anything either, her eyes fixed on her coffee cup, but her mind racing with the 1,000 questions that had been waiting for this moment. Finally, he cleared his throat. Alina. Her name sounded foreign coming from his lips. She looked up slowly, locking eyes with him for the first time in years. Noah, she kept her voice steady, betraying none of the emotions that had bubbled up inside her. She wasn't sure she could trust herself not to let the anger, the hurt, and the betrayal spill out if she said more. He sat down across from her, not waiting for an invitation. There was an awkward pause, neither of them knowing what to say or where to start. Finally, Noah broke the silence. It's been a while. His voice was low, almost apologetic. Alina nodded. 10 years. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that was all too familiar. I know I should have reached out sooner, but you know how things are. I've been busy. Alina raised an eyebrow. Busy? She couldn't help herself. The sarcasm slipped out before she could stop it. Is that why you never bothered to come back? Or maybe it's because you had more important things to focus on than a relationship. Noah's face tightened, but he didn't respond right away. Instead, he glanced at the table, collecting his thoughts. Look, I didn't handle things well. I'll admit that. I was young, and I thought I could handle everything. I chose work over, well, everything else. A small laugh escaped Elena's lips, though it lacked any humor. Yeah, you chose work. You chose your ambition, and I wasn't part of that. Noah didn't flinch. He knew she was right. He had chosen his career, his future in business, and in doing so, he had left her behind. It wasn't that he didn't love her. It was that he had been afraid to lose everything he had worked for. But he didn't say any of that. Instead, he leaned forward, his eyes softening as he spoke. Alina, I was scared. He paused, his voice cracking slightly. I thought if I didn't go all in, I'd end up with nothing. And I thought you'd understand that. I thought it would be temporary. But it wasn't, and I regret it. Alina felt a sting in her chest. She wanted to be angry, to throw his words back in his face, but there was a part of her that still ached for him. She had spent years trying to move on, trying to bury the love she still felt for him. But hearing him say this, hearing him admit his fear and regret made her realize just how deeply she had been affected by his absence. You didn't trust me enough to let me be part of that. Noah, her voice was soft now, almost vulnerable. You left because you thought I couldn't keep up with your plans, that I would hold you back. But what you didn't see was that I was willing to be by your side. He reached across the table, his hand resting just beside hers, but he didn't touch her. I know, Alina. I know. There was a long silence. Alina couldn't bring herself to look at him directly. She wasn't sure she could handle seeing the man she had once loved so much sitting across from her, apologizing for what he had done. It felt too late. Too much had happened since then, and the past was like a wound that never quite healed. So, what now? Alina asked, finally looking up. You want to make amends? You think that's enough? Noah hesitated. I don't expect you to forgive me just like that, but, double quotes, he took a deep breath. I want to try again, if you'll let me. Her heart raced, but she steadied herself. Could she let herself go back to him? Could she trust him again? I don't know if I can just pick up where we left off, Noah. Her words were measured, careful. But I'm willing to give you a chance to prove that you've changed. That you're not just the man who left me for a dream. Noah nodded, his face earnest. I'll do whatever it takes, Alina. I won't let you down again. Alina took a deep breath. The weight of the decision settled on her chest. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild something. The days following their meeting felt like a strange limbo for Alina Price. She couldn't decide if she was relieved or frustrated, or a mix of both. Every night she would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over. Noah's words, his apology, they all felt genuine, but could she really trust him again? Could she forgive him for walking away, for making her feel like she wasn't important enough to fight for? By the time the weekend rolled around, Alina was already back to her usual routine. A quick morning coffee at her favorite cafe, followed by a visit to the community project office. She had a meeting scheduled with the local residents to discuss the new development plans. But her mind kept wandering back to the man she had loved and lost so many years ago as she walked into the office. Her assistant greeted her with a stack of paperwork. Morning, Alina. The meeting with the residents is set for 2 p.m. But there's something else you might want to see. Alina raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What's that? The assistant handed her a folder with the latest project updates and a set of newspaper clippings. One of the articles caught her eye, headline reading, Pierce Urban Development wins bid for Riverfront project. She flipped open the article. It was the usual corporate fluff, shiny promises of revitalization, job creation, and a community-centered development. But what struck Alina was the photo next to it. Noah Pierce, standing proudly next to the model of the proposed development. It felt surreal. The man she had once dreamed about building a life with was now leading the charge for one of the biggest urban projects in the city's history. The same man who had left her because of his ambition, but now, he was back in her life whether she liked it or not. At 2 p.m., Alina stood at the front of the community meeting room, her gaze sweeping across the small crowd of residents. The room buzzed with the usual complaints, fears of gentrification, worries about rising rent prices, and the ever-present desire for more green space in the city. Alina had worked for years on projects like this, listening to people's concerns, trying to find common ground. But today felt different. She couldn't help but feel the weight of Noah's presence looming over her thoughts as the meeting continued. Alina addressed the crowd, outlining the new development plans. She spoke with passion about preserving green spaces, about making sure the new project would benefit the community and not just the wealthy developers. But even as she spoke, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was fighting an uphill battle. Just as she was wrapping up, a familiar voice broke through her thoughts. I think the people of this community deserve more than just promises. They deserve something that truly benefits them. It was Noah. He had arrived unannounced. Standing at the back of the room, his presence impossible to ignore. The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at him. Elena's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't ready for him to show up here. In the middle of her meeting, she took a deep breath, trying to remain composed. Mr. Pierce, she said, her voice cool. I wasn't expecting you today. Noah didn't flinch. He walked toward the front of the room, his eyes meeting Elena's. I thought it was time we had a real conversation, Alina, about the future of this project and the future of the community. The tension in the room was palpable. The residents eyed Noah with skepticism, but Alina didn't flinch. She had to maintain control of this meeting. This is my project now, Noah, and I'm not going to let you turn it into a money grab. Elena's words came out sharp, laced with the frustration she had been holding in for years. Noah's expression softened. I'm not here to take advantage of anyone, Alina. I'm here because I believe in this city. But I also know that this project has the potential to create real change. And if you're willing to listen, we can make it work for everyone. Elena's mind raced. She couldn't deny that Noah had the resources and influence to get things done. But she also knew that his priorities were often more about the bottom line than the people who lived here. The community wasn't just a line on a profit and loss statement for her, it was personal. The only way this will work is if we make sure this community is put first, Alina said, locking eyes with Noah. And if that means putting the brakes on your grand plans, so be it. Noah stepped closer, his voice low but firm. I've been in this business long enough to know that compromise is the key to success. But don't mistake compromise for selling out. Alina took a deep breath. This was it. The moment where they would either find common ground or tear each other apart once and for all. The room held its breath as Alina and Noah locked eyes, the weight of their history pressing down on them both. But neither of them was ready to back down. I'm willing to work with you, Noah, but I won't let you bulldoze this community for the sake of a shiny project. Noah paused. For a brief moment, he seemed to consider her words. Then, with a reluctant nod, he spoke. All right, let's figure out how to make this work for the people. But you have to trust me on this, Alina. We're in this together now. The tension didn't dissipate completely. Alina was still unsure if she could trust him again. But for the first time since their reunion, she felt a flicker of hope. Could they make this work? Could they build something together, not just a city, but maybe their relationship, too? As the meeting adjourned, Alina caught a glimpse of Noah in the back of the room, standing silently as if he were waiting for her decision. She wasn't ready to give him an answer, not yet. But she knew one thing. This was just the beginning. And she wasn't going to let him slip away this time. The following days felt like a whirlwind for Alina Price. The project that had once seemed like a distant, abstract concept was suddenly front and center in her life again, and it had Noah Pierce written all over it. The community meeting had been a turning point. but also a reminder of how much unresolved tension still lingered between them. The more she thought about it, the more Alina realized that the stakes were higher than she had initially imagined. The development plan that Noah was pushing for was massive, and if she wanted to keep the community's needs intact, she had to figure out a way to work with him. For the first time in years, Alina felt the weight of both their personal history and professional ambitions pressing down on her shoulders. She spent the next few days poring over architectural blueprints, drafting counterproposals, and meeting with the residents who had so much at stake in this project. She was determined to make sure that this didn't become just another gentrification project for the rich. It needed to serve the people who had lived in this neighborhood for decades. But every time she sat down to work, her mind wandered back to Noah, his unexpected presence at the meeting. The way he stood there, offering his version of compromise, it all felt too familiar. She remembered the way he used to talk about the city, about creating something that would last. But back then, she was a part of that vision. Now, he was building that vision without her. Elena's phone buzzed on the desk, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Vivian Ross, Noah's PR consultant, and the same woman who had set up their awkward post-meeting conversation. Noah wants to meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. He said it's about the project, but we both know it's more than that. Are you in? Alina sighed, setting the phone down. It had been days since their last confrontation, and as much as she wanted to avoid Noah, she knew this meeting would be inevitable. It wasn't just about business anymore. She still hadn't fully processed what happened between them, and meeting again seemed like the only way to figure out if they could move past the hurt. The next morning, Alina arrived at Pierce Urban Development's headquarters, a sleek, modern building with glass walls that reflected the cold, bright light of the city. As she entered the lobby, she felt the familiar sense of unease creeping up on her. It wasn't just the building that made her uneasy. It was the memories of Noah, and how every part of this world felt like it was built around him. She was escorted upstairs to Noah's office, a spacious room that overlooked the city skyline. His desk was neat, with blueprints for the Riverfront project spread out, alongside a few coffee cups and pens that seemed to have been placed with military precision. Noah himself was standing by the window, staring out at the bustling city below. Alina, his voice, as usual, was calm, measured, but there was something different this time. Undercurrent of urgency. She stepped forward, taking in the view for a moment before turning her attention to the man in front of her. Noah. There was an awkward pause before he gestured toward the seat across from him. Please, sit. I know things have been tense, but I think we need to have a serious discussion about the future of this project. She didn't sit immediately, instead crossing her arms as she eyed him carefully. You mean about the future of the project or the future of us? Noah didn't flinch. Both, actually. Alina felt a pang of frustration. The same words, the same pattern. He was trying to make it seem like they were on the same page, but she wasn't so sure. Let's get one thing straight, Noah. Elena's tone was sharper now. I'm not here to play games. The project needs to serve the community, not just fill your pockets. If you can't see that, then there's no point in having this conversation. He stood up, finally facing her fully. There was something in his expression that made her stop. Guilt. Real, tangible guilt. I know I've made mistakes, Alina, and I know I've put work ahead of everything else, including you. But this project, it's not just about the money. It's about what this city needs. what it deserves. He stepped forward, his voice softer now. I don't expect you to forget everything, but I hope we can work together to make this right. Alina stood there for a long moment, considering his words. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, but that didn't mean he could simply erase the past. The years she had spent without him. The pain of him walking away wasn't something that could be fixed with a few heartfelt words. I'm not here to make you feel better, Noah. I'm here because this project matters. Alina finally spoke, her voice steady. But that doesn't mean I'm going to roll over and let you bulldoze everything I've worked for. If you're serious about this, then we need to find a way to meet in the middle. He nodded, taking a step back. I agree. So, what's your plan? Alina asked, folding her arms again. Noah took a deep breath and moved toward the table where the project plans were laid out. I want to incorporate more green spaces, Alina. I want to make the riverfront accessible to everyone. I want to keep the park intact. And I'm willing to bring in experts to help us get this right. He paused, his voice growing quieter. I can't promise I'll change overnight, but I can promise you that I'm willing to listen. Alina studied him for a moment, trying to gauge his sincerity. Was this really him changing, or was it just another pitch to get what he wanted? She sighed, knowing she couldn't make a decision based on feelings alone. We'll see, Noah. We'll see if you mean it. There was a quiet intensity between them, an unspoken understanding that they both had something to prove. But neither one of them was ready to completely trust the other, and that made everything feel uncertain. As the meeting ended, Alina felt a strange mix of hope and apprehension. The possibility of working with Noah was both daunting and enticing. But the past was a heavy weight on her shoulders, and she couldn't let herself forget it. No matter how hard Noah tried to convince her that things could be different this time, she left his office without looking back. But the nagging question remained. Could they really work together? Or was this just another attempt to patch up something that had already been broken? The next few days were filled with more meetings, more proposals, an endless back and forth between Noah and Alina. They still couldn't fully agree on the direction of the Riverfront project, but something was different. There was an unspoken truce between them. They both wanted the same thing, the success of the project, but their motivations still clashed. Noah had promised to integrate more green spaces, to make the park an essential part of the development. Alina was cautiously optimistic, but her skepticism remained. Could he really follow through? And if he did, at what cost? Today was a pivotal day. The mayor had invited them both to his office for a meeting. Mayor Caldwell, a politician known for his smooth talk and even smoother deals, was a man with ambitions as big as the city itself. Alina had always been wary of his political moves, and Noah was no stranger to the mayor's tactics. But this meeting was more than just business. It was a political play. Alina could feel it in the air the moment she walked into the mayor's office. BYCH, the mayor's office, was grand, with high ceilings, expensive artwork, and an air of quiet power. Mayor Caldwell sat behind his polished oak desk, a faint smile playing on his lips as he welcomed Alina and Noah into the room. He was a man in his late 50s, sharp, with an air of calculated charm. He had a reputation for using big projects like the Riverfront development as stepping stones for his future political aspirations. Noah shook his hand first, then sat down across from him. Alina followed, taking a seat beside him. The mayor didn't waste any time, his tone all business. I'm glad you both could make it today, Mayor Caldwell began, his hands folding neatly in front of him. This project is crucial for the city, and I think we're all on the same page about how it can drive growth and change. Alina exchanged a glance with Noah. They had spoken privately about how the mayor might try to push his own agenda, and this meeting was already starting to feel like a power play. We're committed to ensuring that the development benefits everyone, Mayor, Noah said, trying to keep his voice even. The community, the economy, and the environment. The mayor nodded, but Alina could see the glint of calculation in his eyes. Of course, Noah, I've read the proposal, and I agree with your vision. However, there are a few adjustments I think we need to make. Elena's eyebrows furrowed. She wasn't one to jump to conclusions, but she already had a sinking feeling about where this was going. What adjustments are you suggesting? She asked, her voice firm. The mayor leaned back in his chair, looking between them. Well, there's the matter of funding. He paused for effect. I'm sure you both know that in order to secure the proper backing for this project, we'll need a few key sponsors on board. Some influential people in the city who can help smooth the path for development. I have a few names in mind. Noah's eyes narrowed slightly. Are you suggesting we bring in sponsors whose interests might conflict with the project's community goals? The mayor shrugged, unfazed. Conflicts of interest are part of the game. Noah, politics isn't about purity. It's about making things happen. He looked directly at Alina, and Alina, I know you care deeply about the community, but without the right funding, this project can't move forward. Elena's pulse quickened. She'd expected this. The mayor wasn't interested in community welfare, he was interested in using the project to boost his political profile and line the pockets of his supporters. I won't sacrifice the integrity of this project for political gain. Mayor Elena's voice was steady, though her fingers tightened around the edge of her chair. I won't let this become another development that harms the people it's supposed to help. The mayor's smile faltered for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. I'm not asking you to sacrifice anything. I'm just suggesting we align our interests a bit more closely. After all, a little compromise now will save a lot of trouble down the road. Noah leaned forward, cutting through the tension. I understand the importance of backing, but we won't be swayed by pressure. He paused, his tone serious. If this project is to work, it has to be for the people. We can't allow it to become a tool for anyone's political agenda. For the first time in the meeting, Mayor Caldwell's smile slipped. His expression hardened, the mask of charm cracking for just a moment. So, you're willing to risk everything on principles, Noah? His voice was quieter now, more menacing. I'd hate to see that backfire on you. On both of you. Alina exchanged a glance with Noah. She could feel the weight of the mayor's threat hanging in the air. He wasn't just playing politics, he was trying to control them. But this wasn't a game they were willing to lose. We won't compromise. Mayor, not on this. Noah's voice was steady but resolute. If you want to be a part of this, you'll have to play by our rules. The mayor's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, the room felt like it was closing in on them. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by people like Noah and Alina. But they weren't afraid. They knew the stakes, and they knew that this project could change the city for the better. Well, I suppose we'll see how things play out, Mayor Caldwell said with a forced smile. But I do hope you understand the pressure you're under. The future of this city is in our hands. As they stood to leave, Noah and Alina exchanged a glance. The mayor's words hung in the air, but they weren't backing down. They had to keep pushing forward no matter the political games. As they exited the mayor's office, Alina felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. This project was bigger than just her and Noah. Now it was about the future of the city and the people who lived in it. The mayor might have the power, but they had the vision. But even as they walked down the sleek hallway, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that the mayor wouldn't let them go so easily. If they wanted to see this project through, they'd have to outsmart the very people trying to control it. And that meant making some tough choices that would test their resolve and their commitment to each other. The weeks after the meeting with Mayor Caldwell passed in a blur of endless emails, meetings, and project proposals. Alina threw herself into the work with a passion she hadn't felt in a long time. Despite Noah's promises, she was still wary of his motives, and she couldn't help but second-guess every decision they made together. But the project was moving forward slower than she had hoped, but still moving. The community was still uncertain about what would become of the riverfront, and Alina knew she couldn't afford to let the momentum slip on a rainy Thursday morning. The tension in the air felt different. Alina stood in her office, overlooking the construction site where they had begun the first phase of the project groundbreaking, preparation for the park that would be the centerpiece of the development. She had been in the middle of reviewing a few design plans when her phone buzzed. It was a text from Noah. "We need to talk. There's been an incident at the site." Her stomach churned. She quickly grabbed her coat, her mind racing through 1,000 possibilities. What kind of incident could have happened? By the time Alina arrived at the site, the situation had escalated. Emergency vehicles lined the street near the riverfront, their lights flashing in the downpour. A few workers were gathered near the construction zone, their faces pale. Clearly shaken, Noah was already there, speaking with a group of police officers and emergency responders. His jacket was soaked, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a sense of urgency Alina hadn't seen in him before. She rushed over to him, her heart pounding. "What happened?" she asked, her voice sharp despite the cold chill in the air. Noah turned to her, his expression tense. There was a small flood in the construction area. The rain from last night caused the river levels to rise faster than expected. A few of the workers were caught in the lower section, but we managed to pull them out in time. Thankfully, no one's seriously hurt. But one of the kids who was working as a summer intern was almost trapped. Elena's breath caught in her throat. A young worker, barely out of high school, had almost been swept away by the floodwaters. That could have been a tragedy. "Is he okay?" Alina asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Noah nodded. "He's shaken up, but he's fine. We got him out in time." Relief washed over her, but it was quickly replaced by a gnawing feeling of unease. This project, this whole venture they were building together, was becoming more than just a professional commitment. It was starting to feel like they were in over their heads. "I need to inspect the damage to the infrastructure," Noah continued. "I want to make sure it's safe to continue work in the area. It's going to delay the schedule a bit, but we can handle it. Noah, this can't keep happening." Elena's voice was firm, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "We're talking about people's safety here. If we keep pushing forward without proper checks, things like this will keep happening." He looked at her, his jaw clenched. "I know, I'm aware of the risks, but we're already behind schedule. If we don't meet our deadlines, the whole project will be compromised. We can't prioritize speed over safety," Alina shot back. "This isn't just about timeline. It's about people's lives." For a moment, Noah said nothing, his gaze lingering on her. Then he sighed and nodded. "You're right. I'll take responsibility for this. But we need to find a way to fix the issues before they get worse." The days following the incident were filled with long hours, reevaluating the entire development process. Elena worked with the construction crew to ensure that everything was up to code, reviewing flood prevention measures and making sure the area was safe before any work resumed. As the dust settled, the incident served as a wake-up call for both her and Noah. The safety of the workers, the integrity of the project, and the well-being of the community needed to come first. No matter how ambitious the vision for the city was, they couldn't afford to compromise when it came to people's lives. One evening, a few days after the incident, Elena found herself at the construction site again. This time with Noah. The rain had stopped, and the air had cleared, leaving a sense of calm in the city. They stood near the edge of the river, looking out at the work still to be done. "I should have listened to you sooner," Noah said, breaking the silence. "You were right. Safety should have been our first priority. I got caught up in trying to push this project forward, and I almost lost sight of what really matters." Elena turned to him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "I'm glad you see that." She paused, then added, "It's not about proving we can do it. It's about proving we can do it right." Noah nodded slowly. "I know, and I promise I won't let it happen again." He looked at her, his expression softening. "I'm glad you're here, Elena. I can't do this without you." Elena took a deep breath, the weight of the last few days settling on her shoulders. The emotional roller coaster of working alongside Noah again was starting to take its toll. But in that moment, she realized something important: they were in this together. Despite everything that had happened between them, they still had a shared goal. They both wanted this city to thrive, but that didn't mean things would be easy. Trust was something that would take time to rebuild, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to let her guard down completely. "We'll figure it out," Elena said, her voice steady. "But we need to stay focused. One mistake can cost us everything." Noah nodded again, determination flashing in his eyes. "We'll do it right, together." As they stood there, side by side, staring out at the city they both wanted to change, Elena felt a shift in the air. Maybe they could work together after all. But it wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be without its challenges. The construction incident had reminded them of the real risks involved in this project, not just to the city, but to themselves. Elena knew she couldn't let her guard down just yet. There were still so many unanswered questions, and she had to decide whether she could trust Noah again. But as they walked back toward the office, she couldn't help but wonder if this time they might actually be able to rebuild something worth fighting for. The air felt different the next morning, charged almost. Noah had done what he promised. The flood prevention measures had been reevaluated, additional safety protocols were put in place, and the construction delays were pushed to a minimum. The crew was back on track, and for once, Elena didn't feel the weight of a ticking clock on her shoulders. She wasn't going to allow Noah's push for efficiency to sacrifice the integrity of the project or the people involved. But that didn't mean everything was back to normal. Noah had been distant the past few days. The tension in the air was palpable, like they were both walking on eggshells. They had spent hours discussing the logistics of the project, but there had been no personal conversations since that day at the construction site. No more apologies, no more discussions about what happened between them. Elena wasn't sure if Noah was afraid of pushing her too far or if he was simply too focused on the project. She couldn't deny that she was frustrated, and at times, she found herself wishing he would just open up, really open up, about what was going on inside his head. She needed to know where they stood, both in terms of the project and personally. That evening, after a long day of site inspections, Elena received a message from Noah. It was brief. I'd like to meet. I owe you something. Tomorrow, 8 a.m., coffee. My treat. Noah, Elena, stared at the message for a moment. Was he serious? Was this finally the apology she had been waiting for? She hesitated for a while before responding. Fine, I'll meet you. But if you're going to apologize, I hope it's the real thing. The next morning, Elena arrived at a quiet cafe near the river, one that Noah had suggested. The early morning fog still clung to the city, the river sluggish and thick with mist. It was the perfect setting for a conversation that had been a long time coming. Noah was already there when she arrived, sitting at a table by the window, a steaming cup of coffee in front of him. As soon as Elena walked in, he stood up, his eyes meeting hers. He didn't say anything at first, just offered a quiet, almost nervous smile. She couldn't remember the last time she'd seen him so unsure of himself. She took a seat across from him, crossing her arms, watching him closely. So, what's this about, Noah? He took a deep breath before speaking. Elena, I know I've said this 1,000 times, but I don't think I've said it right. Her eyes narrowed, waiting for him to continue. The frustration that had built up over the last few years was still there, simmering beneath the surface. She wasn't going to let him off the hook easily. Noah leaned forward, his expression serious. I've never been good at this, you know, the whole emotions thing. But you deserve to hear this from me. Not just a quick apology or some thrown-together excuse. Elena's heart skipped a beat, but she held her ground. I'm listening. I'm sorry, Elena. I'm sorry for everything. For choosing my career over you, for not seeing what really mattered at the time, for making you feel like you didn't matter. His voice cracked slightly, a rare vulnerability in his tone. I was so scared of losing everything that I didn't realize what I was actually losing. You, us. The one thing that actually made me feel like I had something real. Elena was silent for a moment, processing his words. She hadn't expected this level of honesty. Noah was always the composed businessman, the guy who kept his emotions buried under layers of ambition. To hear him speak so plainly, so raw, it disarmed her in a way she hadn't anticipated. Why didn't you come back, Noah? She asked quietly. Why didn't you come after me when you realized what you lost? Noah's jaw tightened slightly, and he looked down at his coffee. Because I didn't think I was worthy of coming back. He swallowed hard. I thought you'd moved on, that you had better things to do with your life than wait for me to figure out my mess. And I wasn't wrong. You did move on. You built a life that was everything I couldn't give you. Elena shook her head, the frustration from the past flaring up once more. You don't get it, Noah. I never moved on. I never could. It's not about what you think I needed. It was about what we could have built together. You weren't the only one who suffered when we broke up. He looked up, his eyes searching hers. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Elena felt her breath catch in her throat. She had spent so many years trying to bury her feelings, trying to convince herself that Noah was a part of her past she needed to leave behind. But hearing him say these words, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, it was impossible to ignore the connection that still lingered between them. Do you think we could ever make it work again? Noah asked, his voice quiet but filled with hope. Alina took a deep breath. She had to be careful. The last thing she wanted was to fall back into something she wasn't ready for. But at the same time, she couldn't ignore the pull she still felt toward him. Could they rebuild? Could she trust him again? I don't know, Noah. She paused, searching for the right words. I can't promise you anything right now, but I think we owe it to ourselves to try. Not just for the project, but for what we used to have. Noah's eyes softened, and for the first time since they'd reconnected, Alina saw a glimmer of the man she had once loved, man who was willing to be vulnerable, to admit his mistakes. It was more than she had ever expected. We'll figure it out. Alina, one step at a time. The weight of the past had not completely disappeared, but there was a flicker of something new between them. Hope, possibility, and for the first time in a long time, Alina allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild what had been lost. As they left the cafe, walking side by side into the crisp morning air, Alina couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of something new, or if they were simply reliving the mistakes of the past. The project, the city, and their relationship, everything was in flux. But one thing was clear. This wasn't over. Not yet. The morning light filtered through the wide windows of Pierce urban development, but Alina felt a weight in the air, heavier than any construction blueprint could convey. She wasn't just stepping into a meeting today. She was stepping into uncharted territory. The weight of Noah's apology from the previous night had lingered, and while it had given her a glimmer of hope, it hadn't erased the doubts. We need to talk about next steps. The words echoed in her mind as she walked past Noah's office, seeing him already at work, papers scattered, laptop open, focus sharp. There was something different about him today. It wasn't just the apology, but a sense of ownership, of responsibility. It had been years since she had seen that side of him, but could she trust it? Alina pushed the door open and stepped inside. Noah looked up from his desk, and for a moment their eyes met. The awkwardness between them had dissipated, replaced by something unfamiliar, partnership. She took a deep breath and closed the door behind her, leaning against it for a moment before speaking. We're at a crossroads with this project. The residents are still skeptical, and Caldwell keeps pushing for his own political gain. Alina started, her voice steady, though the frustration was bubbling beneath the surface. We can't let him hijack this for his campaign, Noah. Noah didn't look away. He sat back in his chair, hands steepled in front of him. I know. He's trying to use us as leverage for his next term, and it's not going to work. But we need to play his game to an extent, just enough to keep him on our side. Elena's brow furrowed. She was used to working with people who had ulterior motives, but this felt different. Noah had always been straightforward now. There was a little more strategy in his tone. And yet, it didn't sound like betrayal. It sounded like compromise. And what about the community? Alina asked, a little sharper than intended. You promised me we wouldn't sacrifice them for this project. Noah met her gaze with the same intensity that she remembered from their younger days. Intensity that had always been mixed with ambition. We won't. He paused. But this project is too important to fail, Alina. If we want it to be something that benefits everyone, we need to give a little. That's the only way we'll secure the funding, the support, and the backing to make it real. She nodded slowly. He wasn't wrong. This project could change the city, but she couldn't let the compromises turn it into something hollow. So, what's the new plan? Noah stood up and walked over to the whiteboard behind his desk, grabbing a marker. We need to integrate more community input, more transparency. He wrote down community workshops and quarterly updates. But we also need to start talking to the investors directly. We need their buy-in before we can push forward with anything. Alina bit her lip, her fingers curling into fists. She didn't want to admit it, but Noah's plan was starting to sound like a good one. It was a balance between keeping the community in the loop and playing the game that the mayor and the investors expected. Okay. But we need to make it clear that we won't sacrifice the park for high-rise condos, Alina said, voice firm. If we want people to trust us, we need to make sure we're not just talking about green spaces, we need to deliver them. Agreed, Noah replied, writing down park commitment next to investor engagement. We'll keep the integrity of the green spaces intact. I promise you that Alina let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It was the first time in weeks that she felt like they were on the same page. Maybe they could do this. Maybe they could find a way to balance the ambition with the integrity of the project. The rest of the meeting passed quickly, the two of them discussing the details of the next steps. There were the workshops to arrange, investor calls to make, and community proposals to review. Noah's strategy was clear: win over the community by showing them that their voices mattered, but also win over the investors by proving that their financial stake would lead to real, tangible benefits. By the time the meeting wrapped up, it felt like they had a solid plan in place. Alina stood to leave, but Noah stopped her, his voice hesitant. Alina, there's one more thing. She turned back, eyebrow raised. What is it? He took a breath, his gaze softening. I don't expect everything to be okay between us overnight. But I need you to know I'm in this for more than just the project. I want to rebuild what we had. I don't know how it'll work, but I want to try. Elena's heart skipped a beat. The words were simple, but they hit her harder than anything he'd said before. She wasn't sure if she was ready for that, but the sincerity in his voice made it harder to dismiss. Don't know if I'm ready for that yet, Noah, she said quietly, her voice a little unsteady. But I'll give this project everything I've got. That's where I can start. He nodded, his expression full of understanding. That's enough for now. As she left the office, Alina felt a strange sense of peace that had been missing for so long. The road ahead wasn't clear, but for the first time in a while, she felt like they were moving in the right direction. The project, their work, and even their relationship, all of it was uncertain. But it was real, and that was something she hadn't felt in a long time. Alina and Noah were beginning to find a balance, both in their work and in their personal lives. But with so many obstacles still ahead, it was unclear whether this fragile peace would hold. As Alina left Pierce Urban Development's office that evening, she couldn't shake the feeling that the true test was still ahead. Would they be able to push forward with the project, while also rebuilding the trust that had been broken so many years ago? The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they were in this together, for better or for worse. The weeks following the new plan were intense, filled with long nights of paperwork, meetings, and discussions with both the investors and the community. Alina had thrown herself into the work with more determination than ever, feeling like this project might be her last chance to prove that development could be done responsibly, with the community at its heart. But even as the project gained traction, her connection with Noah had grown more complex. They were in constant contact, working side by side to navigate the tricky dynamics of the development process. For the first time in a long while, Alina started to feel like maybe, just maybe, there could be a future for them beyond the project. Yet, the same doubts still lingered. Could she truly forgive him for the past? Was the project enough to mend the broken trust between them? The turning point was coming. After months of planning and discussions, the final vote was set to take place. The community would decide whether or not to approve the Riverfront redevelopment project. This was the moment that would determine the future of the area, and, in many ways, their future as well. Alina arrived early to the community center where the vote would take place. The room was buzzing with energy, filled with residents from the neighborhood, city officials, and a few local press. There were whispers, murmurs of concern, and the occasional raised voice, but Alina tried to keep her focus. The outcome of today's vote could make or break everything they'd worked for. Noah arrived shortly after, his usually confident demeanor replaced with something softer, more unsure. He met Elena's eyes from across the room, but didn't approach right away. She could tell that he was just as anxious as she was. This wasn't just about business. This was personal. This was the moment they could prove to themselves and to the city that they could make a real, lasting difference. The meeting, as the room filled up, the meeting began with the usual formalities. Alina took her seat at the front of the room, next to Noah, who was now closely watching the proceedings. She noticed how the rest of the room kept glancing at them, waiting for them to speak. The community had seen their efforts, but there were still so many questions, so much skepticism. The mayor, as expected, opened the meeting with a brief speech about the city's potential and how this project would provide jobs, create opportunities, and revitalize a long-neglected area. He smiled as he spoke, but Alina could see the underlying political agenda behind his words. He was still trying to sell this as his victory, and it felt like a reminder of how much power he held over the final outcome when the time came for the community members to voice their opinions. Alina stood, prepared to present their case once again. She had given this speech so many times before, but this time felt different. It wasn't just about convincing the crowd, it was about finding a way to ensure that this time they could truly build something that would benefit the community, not just the developers and investors. I know that some of you have doubts, and I understand that. Alina started, her voice strong yet empathetic. But this project isn't just about building high-rise apartments and luxury condos. It's about giving back to this neighborhood. It's about providing green spaces, creating parks, building something that will last long after the construction cranes are gone. She paused, looking around the room, making eye contact with several of the residents. There were nods, but also skeptical faces. I know there's a fear that this project will push out long-time residents, and that's something we've worked hard to address. Our plan includes affordable housing, space for local businesses, and a public park that will be open to everyone. She turned to Noah, who was sitting quietly next to her. It was time for him to speak. He stood, his voice steady as he addressed the crowd. Elena's right. I know my background. My company's history might make some of you question my motives. But I want to be clear. I'm here because I believe in this city. And I believe in the potential of this project to bring people together. His eyes scanned the room. And for the first time, Alina saw him look vulnerable, like he wasn't just trying to convince them, but truly trying to prove something to himself. 2. This is not just another development. We're committed to making this work for everyone. We've listened to your concerns, and we've made changes to the plan to ensure that the community's voice is heard. He paused, meeting Elena's gaze. And, no matter what happens today, I promise we won't stop working to make sure this project honors what this neighborhood is all about. There was a tense silence After Noah finished speaking, the room was still, but Alina could feel the energy shift. She had seen the doubt in the residents' eyes, but now there was something different. Maybe it was the sincerity in Noah's voice, or maybe it was the fact that they had made the community a part of this process. But for the first time in a long time, Alina felt a sliver of hope. The vote, after several more community members voiced their opinions, it was time for the vote. The room fell silent as the ballots were collected, and Alina couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. The outcome of this vote would change everything. The mayor stood up to announce the results. His smile wide and rehearsed, but there was a tension in his eyes. "We've tallied the votes, and I'm happy to announce that the Riverfront redevelopment project has been approved." A ripple of applause broke out, but Alina's mind raced. She didn't feel the victory she thought she would. She couldn't help but think about the battles that lay ahead, fighting for the integrity of the park, keeping the promises they had made, and making sure the community's voice remained at the center of everything. As the crowd dispersed, Noah turned to Alina, his expression softening. "We did it." She nodded, a quiet smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "We did. But this is just the beginning. Noah, the real work starts now." The approval of the project was a victory, but it was only a small step in a much larger journey. As Alina and Noah walked out of the community center together, they both knew that the hardest part was still ahead. The political games, the community challenges, the pressure from investors, it all still loomed. But for the first time in years, Alina felt like she was walking forward with someone she could trust. Whether or not Noah could prove himself in the long run, she wasn't sure. But today, they had crossed a bridge, and for once, it felt like they were in it together. The morning after the community vote, Alina stood by the riverfront, watching the bustling construction site. The city felt alive, full of possibilities, but also weighed down by the complexity of the work ahead. The approval had been a victory, but as she gazed out over the land that would soon be transformed, she knew that this was just the beginning. She and Noah still had so much to prove, not just to the community, but to each other. Noah arrived shortly after, walking towards her with the same purposeful stride he'd had for years. But today, there was something different in his step. The stress of the past few weeks had faded, and a new sense of determination had replaced it. Alina couldn't help but notice the way he looked at her, as though everything had shifted between them, even if she wasn't quite ready to admit it to herself. "I've been thinking about what's next," Noah said, his voice more relaxed than it had been in the past. "Now that we have the green light, we need to get the ball rolling. But we also need to show the community we're sticking to the vision we promised." Alina nodded, her arms crossed over her chest. "I'm glad you're finally seeing it, Noah. This project, our vision, has to be built on trust. And that means we need to do more than just what we agreed on. We need to keep those promises, no matter how hard it gets." He stepped closer, his expression serious, but there was an undeniable softness in his eyes. "I've learned that it's not just about what we build on the outside, but the foundation we lay on the inside. And I want you to know, Alina, that I'm all in. I'll do whatever it takes to make this work for you, for the community." Her breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure how to respond. Everything he said resonated with her. She saw a man she'd once loved, but this was different. This wasn't the same Noah who had walked away from her. This was someone who was willing to fight for something more. "I believe you. But you're right, Noah. This is just the start." Alina looked out over the land once more. the weight of everything they were about to undertake settling over her. But we can do this, together. Noah smiled, his gaze lingering on her for a moment too long, like he wanted to say more but didn't quite know how. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulling out something small and shiny. He held it out in front of her, and for a split second, Elena thought he was handing her a piece of the Riverfront blueprint. But when she looked closer, she saw the small box in his palm. "What is this?" Elena asked, surprised, her heart skipping a beat. "A bridge," Noah replied simply, his voice softening with emotion. "A bridge to a new beginning. Something we can build together." Her fingers trembled as she took the box from him, and when she opened it, the silver glint of a wedding band met her eyes. She blinked, unsure whether her heart was racing from the surprise or the significance of the gesture. Noah dropped to one knee, his eyes never leaving hers. "Elena Price, I've spent the last decade trying to build a life based on ambition and fear. But the only thing that really matters is love. And if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life rebuilding with you side by side." Elena's breath caught in her throat, and for the first time in a long while, the past, the doubts, and the pain seemed to fade into the background. There was only Noah, this man who had made mistakes, but who was finally showing her the person he could be. The person he wanted to be for her. Yes, the word came out so naturally that it almost felt like she hadn't made the decision herself. Yes, Noah. A year passed since the wedding. The Riverfront development was almost complete, a shining example of what could happen when community, ambition, and love came together. Elena had played a pivotal role in ensuring the project honored its commitment to the people. And Noah had kept his promises, delivering not just a development, but a space that was meant to last for generations. But more than that, they had built something far more important, life together. On the opening day of the community park, Noah and Elena stood hand in hand at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, surrounded by the people they had fought for. The park was beautiful, a blend of green space, public art, and accessible areas for everyone. It wasn't just the park they had built, but a sense of community, a sense of trust. The mayor had been there, too. But it was clear that the spotlight belonged to Noah and Elena. The journey had been long, full of compromises and sacrifices, but they had done it. Together, as the ribbon was cut, Noah turned to Elena, his face breaking into a smile. "We did it," she smiled back, her heart full. "We did. And now, let's build the next chapter. Together." Asterisk, asterisk, the sun set over the river, casting a golden glow on the park, and in that moment, Elena realized that this was what they had been working for all along, not just the city, not just the project, but the future they were building together.